What's going on, everybody? I'm John.
I'm Denison.
This is the Catchup.
And we're back, guys, with another wonderful interview with the Catchup podcast. This time I have a wonderful guest, Gregory. Gregory, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Man, I don't even know where to start here. I am
I know it's a loaded question, right? I know.
It really is. I never have that prepared, but I'll just say that I am one person that is trying to change the entire world one question at a time.
Hey, there you go.
Keep it
There you
simple.
go. Exactly. Keep it simple, keep it short, all that stuff. And so I know we're also doing your show, Question Everything. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us where we can find you as well.
All right, question everything. That is the show, and it started. It was birthed of a COVID diagnosis. I thought, if this takes me out, it takes all of me, and it leaves only what I've left behind, which is not something I'm proud of. So,
Mm-hmm.
that being said, you can find me on YouTube. You type in "question everything" or look for the what do you call that? The help me.
Let's see on the links.
Sorry, the
No
channel
worries.
G Wiz Insane. GWIZ.
Okay.
SANE. G Wiz Insane.
There we go.
I started a new channel, but I haven't moved everything over yet. Just kind of been busy with everything at work.
Hey man, I know the feeling. I feel like COVID has made us all work a lot more than than we did before. And plus at the same time, you've got your hands in like everything. So, just because your 9 to 5 isn't just your 9 to 5, you've got like 5 or 6 other things going on. So, you know, um, you're a busy man. You're a busy man.
I try to stay busy, and I don't mind as the devil's playground. And I don't know how's that.
Makes sense.
There's a little life coaching going on as well, so I'm transferring into full-time entrepreneurship. So
Okay.
having my hands in a little bit of everything is what I'm trying to get used to. That's the new normal.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. And it makes sense. Um, so, I can't wait to get into this wonderful topic that we got, which is education. I know it's something that's, super, super important to you as well as me. And I feel like our audience in general are going to really, really enjoy this topic because it touches everybody's life in one way or another. And it's a big thing. It's a really big deal. So I think we should go ahead and jump into this topic.
Let's do it.
All right. So, of course, as I said before, we're getting into the topic of education, which is it's the backbone of our society. To be honest, right? It's something that everybody is touched by in one shape or form. Um, and so I kind of think it's interesting to hear everybody's perspective on how their education was when they were growing up. Like I know, for instance, the way when I was growing up, it was very different than I think a lot of people's were, or um, just because of I have dyslexia, and so that kind of makes a big difference when it comes to like how the education system works for me, I guess, because it's a lot different. Um, so yeah, so I kind of wanted to get your opinion on, or I kind of what your experience on that, and then we can kind of get into mine. So
All right. Well, I mean, I can't even begin to understand what it would have been like growing up
Hmm.
with everything backwards. Dyslexia, the school system's not built around that.
Mm-hmm.
have a similar story because my life has just been backwards in general.
Mm.
I grew up, I was raised with my grandmother because my mom already had 4 children that were in their teens and
Mm-hmm.
never understood it then, but I get it now because I have 5 teens. Handle a brand new child with teenagers trying to get them out of school and get through all the emotional stuff. And she had 3 girls and a boy at the time. So I can only
Oh man.
imagine what the hormones were like. So, actually speaking this out loud is the first time I've ever thought about that empathetically. But moving on, I grew up with my grandmother in New York and I started school in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this constant fight to try to get back to my mom the whole time. So it was struggle. But
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that affected my education and I couldn't really focus.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get attention, and then when I finally did move back with her, we were moving to France, and I
Oh
started
wow.
the American School of Paris. And being bad has its perks sometimes. You learn what not to do, and you learn from your mistakes. And so, I want to say, a month or two into being in the American School of Paris, I was kicked out.
Oh no.
Just say I couldn't keep it in my pants, even at that. It was a mess. I just, just I was a mess.
Mm.
And so I got kicked out of there. We won't go into all the details. And I had to go to the French school down the street from me. So there was no more riding the bus to ride the train to go to St. Cloud
Mm-hmm.
because it was like 20 miles away. It was within walking distance. So I walked to school. I sat next to this British chick named Emily,
Mm-hmm.
and she taught me everything I needed to know, bad words first.
Of course.
It was education here is different with languages because it's like, well, everyone needs to learn to speak English. That's the mentality we have here.
Mm-hmm.
We are falling behind so far because in Europe, you have to know at least 5 languages because everything is so close that if you
Mm.
want to travel, if you want to go anywhere, you have to learn to speak Spanish, English, French, German, and maybe one more language, Portuguese or Swiss, Dutch.
Wow.
So there's all those right there in what would be like the DFW Metroplex for us. So I was offered to take English while I was over there,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, why would I want to do that? That's easy. I already know English. Let me take Dutch. I still don't remember it, but the French stuck with me because of the immersion. I'm saying all
Mm.
this to say that immersing yourself in a language or in something you want to learn about or a topic that you want to know more about is the best way to do it because you
Mm-hmm.
safety net. So I had no safety net over there. My safety net was removed when Emily moved away. It was like, oh crap, I gotta know French. So I'm the only person in my family that really speaks French fluently. And here,
Wow.
25 years later, I still speak French. But the over there, I was the tallest, the oldest, the coolest because I was from
Mm-hmm.
America. I told him I was from California because California was way cooler than New York and at the time. And so I was like, yeah, I'm from California. And, I was in LA and all the kid stuff we do, right? But then I come back over here and I'm the shortest, the youngest. I have long hair and I speak French. They called me Frenchie. They picked on me. I couldn't, when I first got back into the American school system, I thought,
Mm-hmm.
what are these giants? So huge here. And I'm like 4 foot 11. I was 11 years old coming in the seventh grade. No, 12, 11 or 12 coming in the seventh grade. I want to say it was 11 because my
Wow.
birthday was in December. And so the first day I'm walking around the halls, I'm confused because everything used to be in one classroom. I went from
Mm-hmm.
fifth grade, the equivalent of fifth grade in France, to seventh grade in America, from one classroom for everything to having to go to different classrooms. And
Oh.
there's no training on that. So I'm walking around.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, have you checked your schedule? Have you checked your schedule? I'm like, what is this schedule? And so I'm like, these 2 tall kids finally come over to me. Do you know where you're supposed to be? No, everyone keeps saying to check my schedule, and all I have is this paper that says Shaduli on it. Language barrier, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I I had a real hard time with behavior more than knowledge.
Mm.
The fact that, see, they diagnosed me as I had ADHD, but I don't like to hold on to labels. I never have. Like, I didn't like that label because it's not that I can't focus or I'm too hyper. It's that I'm not meant to focus on what you want me to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of energy. You have to, for me, I think that the whole ADHD label is just those people that have to move and think at the same time.
Mm.
So something like being a barista or playing tennis, something that I have to think and move is what keeps me engaged.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, there were certain subjects that were really cool, but I ended up getting put into resource classes. So I was in the class with the other kids that couldn't get along with other people well.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
They gave you all your work at once, and whenever you were done with it, you could do whatever you want, take a nap, do whatever you want. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like because I didn't fit in to the mold, I was put in a place where I didn't even know how to get along with people, even more so because I didn't have to.
Mm.
I didn't get out of those classes from 8th grade till, I want to say, 11th grade. They finally let me loose at the end. Then I became an office aide my senior year, and it was like it was awkward at first, but I realized how much of a people person I am. And I
Mm-hmm.
always got that, Greg, you're great when you apply yourself. So when I applied myself, I noticed that there was this natural energy of people love who I am, but I learned to focus on the work first and then have fun rather than,
Mm.
I don't want to focus on that. Let's just have fun.
So
So
you had to retrain your brain.
exactly. And, I was on the Ritalin for a little while, and I hated that because it felt like I went inside my body, shut myself in a cell, and watched myself happening. It was
Hmm.
like I was a bystander in my own life. It shut.
Went to the sunken place.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, what was that movie? Get Out?
Get out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's exactly what that felt like. So, um,
Man.
education for me was more behavioral than critical and thinking and learning. Because ask me what I learned in high school, junior high, all that. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I remember a couple things about economics because that was something that interested me because I knew that we were going to have to do stuff with money
Mm-hmm.
and taxes, all that stuff. And then how to flirt with girls. That's all that stuck. So I'm
Did you find, like, when you came from France, because I know it was just the change in, like, how they do things, but did you find, like, where your education level, did you find like you were ahead of people, or were you about the same? Because I've heard that some people come from like other countries and stuff, and they're like, oh, I covered this ages ago or whatever like that. And everyone else here is just like, oh, well, this is their first time. Did you have that?
I did. I come over here and it felt like everything was slowed down.
Mm.
It almost felt like it was on purpose.
Hmm.
Like, don't overwhelm them, don't give them too much. And over there it was like, no, we're going this and this. We had it was constantly throwing new stuff at us and challenging us. And then they had this balance. So every year we did something different where we actually went out and did stuff. So that
Oh.
ADHD problems there, I was normal. Here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a problem. Another thing, I didn't realize I was black until I moved back to the US. They didn't
That's interesting.
Yeah, they didn't ask about, they didn't care about the color of your skin or your
Mm.
ethnicity or where you were from unless they wanted to know what language they needed to speak to you. That's the only
Okay.
reason they needed to know who you were or where you came from.
Hmm.
But over there, like, the first year was like swimming, the next year was bike riding, then there was skating, there was horseback riding, and then there was I want to say there was soccer, but over there it's called football.
Yeah.
So there's there was always some activity that we did as balance. And oh, let me tell you, the cafeterias over there were excellent.
I would imagine. I mean, France has amazing food, so.
They they always got mad at me because I'd go back for like seconds and thirds of the bread because there was still gravy left with my duck. And
Hmm.
where else can you have duck in elementary school?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it was amazing.
Normally, it's a frozen meal.
Yeah. So yeah, the question
No worries.
was I advanced when I came? Yes, I felt more advanced. I felt a little more disciplined.
Mm,
And then I came back over here and the discipline looked different.
okay, interesting. That's really interesting because that sounds like a better. It sounds like in France they have more of an all-inclusive like education system. Like they make sure that everybody is. It's not just like everybody is on the same page, but it's everybody is able to. They have the same opportunities because the way they change it up, they have it. It's almost like all those studies that we saw kind of like start to pop up really in the 90s and the early 2000s about like how we need to change our education system. It sounds like they already had that put in place, and they're like, this way everybody's getting inclusive, everybody's learning as quickly as possible, and they don't have those same type of like holdbacks where when you come over to the United States it's like you're going to learn this way and you're going to like it.
Right. Right.
And that's it's almost to be honest, it kind of sounds like in France they had more of an idealistic way of how you want to actually run an education system, like the proper way, right? Because it's not just like you're learning different languages, you're learning different subjects, you're learning different like things, but it's also applying those things because they understand that not everyone is just someone who can learn by sitting down in a classroom and taking in the information and then that's it. They're like, oh, well, if
Uh-oh. You froze.
we have, if you look good. Oh, let me see.
You're back now, but
There we go.
it was if we and then froze for a while.
Oh, okay. Let me see. I'll start back at um where was I? Let me see.
Idealistic.
Oh, okay. So yeah, like France has more like an idealistic to where it's like you you're gonna learn, we're gonna teach you something, but we're also gonna help you apply it.
Yeah.
So that way you really um like it really solidifies
Yeah.
like, and I for me that's like a learning style that like resonates a lot for me. Like for me, when I started like a lot of my tech classes, especially in like college and stuff, um the biggest thing that really helped me out when I did like my CCNA stuff was we would go over a chapter, and then right after, like the classes were 4 hours long, but it would be like 2 hours of lecture and then 2 hours of an actual like lab, which is where we're going in and actually doing the stuff that we just learned, which helped me so much because it solidified that in my brain,
Right.
right? And I feel like doing that with just like other forms of education makes a lot more sense. And I understand like when you're teaching someone history, right? You can't just say like, all right, guys, we're gonna take a field trip to Washington, DC or something like that. So
Right.
that way you can remember the battle of Gettysburg or something like that. Um
That was cool though.
that
Yeah.
would be cool.
Oh, hey, I remember this place because I actually went there.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be awesome. But I understand, you can't do that exactly, but
You
um,
went.
I really like that. So I guess another question before I kind of, I guess I can share my experience with the education system is like, um, how did they? Because I know in like other countries, like I know like in Japan, right? I think it's like once you get to high school, um, they're essentially training you automatically for what you want to do in some ways. Like you essentially apply to a high school like you would be applying to like a college.
Right.
Um, I know you weren't there in France for that, for long enough to like get to high school, if I'm not mistaken, right? Um,
So they had uh it was CP, CE1, CE2, CM1, CM2, and
mm,
then it was college.
okay.
And it was uh primary school. It was weird. It was all different. It was
Mm,
backwards, but like you said, it was almost like they were preparing you for your future
mm,
way earlier. So I don't know exactly what that process was because I wasn't over there. I know I have
mm-hmm,
a sister that went to college over there, and she has been in school pretty much her whole life because of the whole I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. I'll do this, and so just keep going back for different things. And
mm-hmm.
when she was there, I feel like that was the happiest time. It was just a different way of learning, and
Yeah.
I don't know personally, unfortunately, how that is. I want to experience it, but I do know that every building out there just had some kind of history. It didn't feel like just someone put up a bunch of drywall and, and put together an institution or some brick. It was actual history that went into the walls. So
That's awesome.
imagine it was a different experience. I know just walking around out there felt like a different experience. Everything felt like there was more put into it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder how much of that is a reflection of the education system and how people are brought up to be more passionate about what they want. One of my biggest things with education is I feel like it's time for it to be changed altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was so great, it wouldn't have broken so easily as soon as the pandemic hit.
Exactly.
Um, so I want to know, same thing for you. Like, what was your experience with education coming up?
Yeah. So for me, it was interesting, right? It's interesting because I feel like each portion of my education um was a different experience than the next, I guess. And in I feel like at the end of it, it kind of made me really feel like we really need to change how we do education. So for me, when I first started and when I first started school, uh, for me, I just knew that I had a hard time reading. Right, letters would change around on me, and it's just to give people a little bit of a background. It's sometimes it's sometimes the media gets it right, and sometimes they don't. And there's actually different forms of dyslexia because not everyone just has the letters switching around, right? Some people actually have it to where it's numbers that'll switch around and move around. Sometimes you can have a combination of the two, and then there are also different degrees of how much it'll change, right? So for me, it was a little bit of like anything that looked similar. So like a lowercase p and a lowercase q
Mm,
look for
mm,
me, they would switch around.
mm,
So it would be, I would just be reading a word and like, oh, wait, that doesn't sound right or whatever like that. Or like a B and a D. Um, those would interchange and stuff like that. And there were a few other things as well that kind of made it really hard. And for me, when I was growing up, uh, at least I'll say probably about halfway in my as I was in elementary school, they kind of figured out what was going on. But like I'll say from uh, I'll say first grade to uh, about fifth grade, really. they just thought I had some sort of learning disability. And so, the education system at that point in time, they just kind of throw you into a class of people who have a hard time learning. And so that's everybody. You get thrown into the, like you said, the resource classes or whatever like that. But yeah, you getting thrown into the one size fits all.
Mhm.
So you're getting in there with kids who have ADHD, who have, all sorts of other different learning disabilities. And it's usually one teacher, right? One or two teachers, and they'll have some aides sometimes,
Yep.
um, depending on how nice your school is, because that also changes how it is. Um, and they will try and figure out how, what's the best way to help you learn, and go from there. And just a quick sidetrack, like I have to say, like any teacher who helps kids with disabilities, like all hats off to them, because I feel like our education system isn't like helping them be fully prepared for that type of stuff. And so, like, I feel like they are some of the hardest working teachers ever, because I've had some of every time um, I was in any of those classes, those were the best people ever. They were so nice, they were so friendly, they were so helpful. Like they really, really tried,
There.
and they wanted to be your friend as well.
Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, like I said, I was in those classes. I was learning. I was trying to figure out as much as possible, and they helped. But I think it was around fifth grade or so when they kind of ended up finding out, saying like, "Oh, well, you know what? We've kind of got this new information and stuff like that, and we found out that you have like dyslexia." And so for me, I was like, oh wow, okay. Now at least I have, a name to what is going on. Because that's also the other weirdest thing. It's when you don't know
Right.
what you have and they just say, oh, well, you just have a hard time learning. It kind of messes with your psyche a little bit. And I felt like when I was in those classes and stuff like that, I had almost, in some ways, I felt like I had to kind of grow up a little bit faster because I was just trying to figure out how to. And at the same time, you have this thing of the school system and society trying to push this normalcy on you, right? So for me, I had always in the back of my head, I need to be normal.
Mhm.
So I would hide that I would go to these special classes, because it was also weird because they're like, oh, well, you just have issues in English and I think they said English and math. Um, and so I would go to these special classes for English and math. But I would go to history and I would go to science because I was perfectly fine with those. And then plus I also love those. So those were easy for me to get. But yeah, I would have friends who would be normal, right? Or quote unquote normal. That's really what it is. Um, and I would hide that from them. I would say like, "Oh, I'm just going to like a different class," and never, and they'd just be like, "Oh, okay, well, cool, you're just going to a smart class or something like that."
Right.
And yeah, and so I would go and do my thing, and then I'd come back, and I was ashamed of myself for something that I couldn't control.
Isn't that? I'm loving that you're touching on this. I didn't realize that was your backstory as well.
Hmm.
So I guess my question with that is, don't you think the real disability is in trying to put everyone in a box that they don't belong in?
Yep.
And then when you don't fit into this box that they've carefully constructed, even though it doesn't make sense for everyone, it just makes sense for the person that constructed the box. Now you have a disability and you have this and you have this and you're ADHD and you're dyslexic because you don't learn the way that we think you need to learn to make it easy for us to capitalize on it.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I think that we were speaking earlier on reform. I think that the reform that needs to happen, I think that the opportunity that COVID has created is that, could you imagine a world where the children are brought up and we're looking for their strengths and we're playing on their strengths, and
Hmm.
everything that this person does best, right? You're great when you apply yourself. So what do we apply you to that you're great at? And how do we mold that and fix that? Because in the tech world, we have unicorns, right? Or
Yeah.
I consider myself a unicorn because I know a little bit about everything, but I was reading an article one time that says you really look like a jagged comb. You have this straight line of you're in tech, and you have just a little bit on all these what do you call those? The comb.
Uh, yeah, like the
I won't
I can't like
first,
the different like peaks and
right?
stuff.
Yes. Yes. So when we're trying to fix our weaknesses and we're trying to get better at things we suck at, we end up letting the things we're really good at suffer for to be mediocre at other things that we really shouldn't even be involved in, right?
Exactly.
But if we were to play on all our strengths, right, and then work together, like you could have a classroom with someone that's dyslexic, someone that's ADHD, someone that's, you know, all these different disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
and come up with the best thing that's ever helped this world because of the brains and the way they work if
Yeah,
you played on their
exactly.
strengths. But since everybody's trying to fit you in this curriculum, this course curriculum that basically trains you to work in a workplace or to be better in prison, one or the
Yep,
other. But,
exactly.
I mean, it's either voluntary prison that you get paid for or prison that you go to because you don't conform well.
Exactly. Exactly. Um yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. It's just because that's the thing, and I feel like that's something that a lot of people miss. Like a lot of people with disabilities are some of the brightest people ever. Like I remember my time in those classes, there were kids who were like insanely smart. It's just they had issues in certain subjects or certain things, right? The boxes, like you said, that they put us in. Um, and it's like, yeah, if our school system would have been able to, and I understand, like it's hard to say, like, it feels like it's one of those things that's very idealistic, right? It's like, yeah, of course, if we can just, screen every kid and put them in a specific spot, well, everything would be great, but we can't do that. But I feel like there's a, and I hate like saying things without actually giving like good solutions, but I do feel like there is an easy way to do it. Um, I think like some of the ways, kind of like how I think back actually to how when I was going to those classes, right? They knew that I was really good in history and science, right? And they knew that I had some sort of aptitude in math. It's just I had some other issues because of my dyslexia, right? If they would have tried to focus in on those type of things and help me understand like, hey, and it sounds weird for people to say like tell your child like, hey, you're really good at math and science, maybe you should go and do engineering when you grow up or whatever like that, right? You know, like most of the time you're not going to tell that to a 9-year-old, right? Because a 9-year-old is like, I don't know what this is. But I feel like if we did something similar to that, like at least start them on the path of that, so that way they can kind of get introduced to it and understand like, hey, maybe we'll have you put you in this class, and we'll put you in this class, instead of like in high school where they're like, hey, choose your electives. Of course you have to do specific stuff, but choose your stuff. Like, yeah, it's cool for you to say you get to choose what you really want to check out and stuff like that, but sometimes it's hard for us to I feel like sometimes it's hard for us to figure out what we actually want and tell someone else with an outside perspective, because we're always inside of our own heads, but with an outside perspective to say like, oh, hey, you're really good at this, so maybe you should try and focus on this.
And I think that's the training that should be happening with our educators is learn how to see what they can't see and bring it out of them, because the word education in itself comes from a Latin word educe, which means
Hmm.
to bring from within. And where we get confused is we think an education is getting information and putting it inside of ourselves. But how many people have graduated some school or got some degree, and you get out and you still feel like an imposter because you don't know anything about anything you just learned about because you just memorized it to get a test or to write it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was gone, brain dump, right? Because you
Exactly.
applied it. I remember having there was a guy that came and spoke at the school I went to, the college I went to, and he
Mm-hmm.
said originally college was supposed to be something that when you went to college, you were the only one in your family, and you brought that back and you taught them. And what by teaching them, when one teaches to learn,
Yep. Exactly.
teaches to learn. It's double edge right there. But the I think that if we were a little more empathetic with people instead of trying to just come up with some one size fits all, fix all solution for it all.
Mm-hmm. Turn it into an assembly line.
Exactly.
Because that's what we do with our kids, right? You press the lever so that way we can, with our education, so that way we can stamp them through,
Right.
and then that's it.
Let me tell you, having 5 children, 5 different personalities,
Mm-hmm.
5 different ranges of emotions, I can't send a group text and tell them all the same thing. I learned this the hard way. One of them can take harsh, one of them has to be told a different way, one of them has a resentment. Like there's just all this, and then there's 2 girls. So you can never tell the girls the same thing. It's got to be individual. So I have to take time to spend with each one of them and work with their strengths and their weaknesses. And I don't like to call them weaknesses. It's like opportunities, just like
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic. It's not a weakness because you
No.
can't do this the way that everyone else does this. It's an opportunity for you to find out how you can capitalize on your weakness and use your strength. I mean, if I'm not great with the academic side of things, but I'm excellent with creating and music and the things that the academic people aren't so good with.
Mm-hmm.
Why not team me up with someone that's left-brained
Yep.
and be that they can't be, and they can be that I can't be.
Exactly.
That's another part of that we could we could just take a whole new approach to education altogether. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, man. It's something
No, no.
about because like you said, I do have kids. We both knew what it was like to grow up in the resource rooms and being put in some place because we were outliers, which
Mm-hmm.
made us feel shame about ourselves when really we're the ones that are greater because we have, lose one sense, gain another. Okay, so I can
Mm-hmm.
read right. So I can't write a 5,000 page paper or read a novel and then be able to give you a dissertation on it. But I can also see patterns that not
Mm-hmm.
people can't see. I can
Mm-hmm.
I can bring to life a song or a whole production that maybe you could write the script for and now we can work together.
Exactly.
How do we use that? I guess that's my question is how do we start thinking about this? Like are we waiting for someone else to make these changes happen or are we going to be the ones to put our foot out there and maybe not our foot to take the action to
Yeah.
start the changes?
Yeah. That's see, that's the hard part, right? Because it's like, and I think that's also part of just like the maybe like the disillusion of a lot of stuff, right? It's we because I feel like sometimes I feel like it's like I want to make the change, right? I want to be the person who's gonna be like, all right, we just need to make this reform, we just need to make this task. But I feel like the way our system is structured,
Mhm.
um, it's not something that you can just be like, oh, good, you're done. Like, oh yeah, it's not like I can just go to one person or whatever like that and say like, hey, we really need to make this change, and then bam, it gets implemented, or someone starts the process of it, right? It's like, because I've gone to like a city council meeting before, right? And I can propose certain things, but that doesn't mean that they're actually going to do anything about it, especially if they I find that sometimes they'll make you feel like you're not, like you don't know what you're talking about, because they're like, "Oh, well, what's your plan?" And then you're like, "Oh, well, I don't have like a specific plan because I don't know the stuff you know, but I can say like I have an outline of what I'm doing." But they're like, "Oh, well, if you don't have a full plan, then your idea is not valid." And I feel like I think that's kind of something that we need to start to change, right? It's just because someone doesn't have a full plan, but if they have a partial plan, kind of like you're saying, you know, your right brain paired with your left brain, you can make that change.
What if pairing with the people in the city council, pairing with the people that make the changes to have a discussion is part of the plan?
Mm,
What if I don't have the
you're
full plan?
right.
I do have the eagle eye view, the 30,000-foot view of what this would look like and who needs to go in what place. It's still a plan, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Um, there was an article, a lady I met with at a fireside chat. She was she wrote an article on the systems of oppression and how um, critical pedagogy and arts education to disrupt systems of oppression. So basically, starting this change that we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
in arts and letting it affect the academic side. But she was talking about there's ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized oppression. And these systems work from the level we're talking about with the people that make the decisions,
Mm-hmm.
where ideological oppression forms a foundation and stems from the idea that one group is somehow better than the other, and in some measure has the right to control the other group. That's where
Mm-hmm.
that starts, and then it goes from that the ideology
Yeah.
forms the institutional oppression that occurs when ideological oppression becomes embedded in the institutions of society, the laws, legal system, political practice. The reason why you can't just go in and say, I need this to be changed. Education systems, schools, hiring policies, public policies, housing development, media images, political power, all of that, which turns to interpersonal oppression, which results when ideological and institutional oppression gives permission and reinforcement for individual members of a dominant group to personally disrespect or mistreat individuals in the oppressed group.
Mm.
Finally, when individuals of an oppressed group internalize ideological inferiority, observe it reflected in their institutions, and endure interpersonal mistreatment, internalized oppression can result. That's when we internalize that oppression. So it starts here and it snowballs into
Mm-hmm.
our our very core,
Exactly.
talking about that very thing that happened. So if we're going to do anything about it, we need to change the ideology.
That's true.
But the plan doesn't have to be down to the nitty-gritty details. It can be ideology as well. I think that the energy that we bring when we're making this change, when we're talking about this passionately, is what's going to make that change and make it. We're seeing it already with the racial tension and what's going
Mm-hmm.
on, and how everyone's now aware of how what they do affects people of color or people that are in underrepresented groups.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's taking a look at that, you know? So I feel like we've got the ball rolling.
Yes. I feel like COVID has forced the ball to start rolling,
Definitely.
because um it it forced us into an uncomfortable situation, so that way we could reevaluate how we do things, right? Like, and I've talked to this a few times, where I feel like COVID is one of the best and worst things to happen to the world, sadly, is because I've noticed, at least when and of course, I have a kind of a tech mind, so a lot of it is just me seeing how we change things tech wise, but I feel like it's modernized a lot of stuff, a lot of old systems that needed to be modernized, but we kept because we said, well, it works, so it's fine. When it can, in truth, it can be done so much more efficiently and so much more um, uh, just faster,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so I feel like this, the racial tensions that's happening, and like I guess um us being able to actually see it more, because I feel because we're all stuck inside, right? The invention of the camera phone is helping a ton because people can capture stuff on video, like what happened with George Floyd. I felt like that was another version of what happened, like back in was it, I think it's Birmingham, Alabama, when the world saw the fire hose.
I
I think
was
it was the exact same thing.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Um, and it
definitely.
was what we needed.
Yeah.
And so it's taking that momentum that we're getting from, like you said, the snowball of um or not snowball, but just like the change of ideology when it comes to um one class isn't better than the other, that it's really here, but we're our society has ingrained it to be feeling like it's, one person's up here and the other person's down here, when in truth it's all in the middle.
Hmm.
um because it really is just one of those things of like, it's just another I'm just another person who's talking to another person, just because of maybe how my education was, or how my um or how what family I was raised in, or whatever like that, or the color of my skin doesn't mean that I don't have any more or less value than you do. um and so I feel like, going back to education, um we need to instill that in our children by making sure, because we already start by, as you said, putting everybody in that box. If you don't meet the standards of this box, then that means you are automatically a lesser person.
Right. And going back to the root word in education, bringing it out of us. We have so much more than we even realize is inside of us, but because of the way education is set up,
Mm-hmm.
unless you unless you specialize in something or you have a piece of paper that validates that you know more about less,
Yep.
think the higher you go in pieces of paper that you acquire and debt that goes with that, the less you know, the
That's
more
true.
you know about less. So let's say I want to get a PhD in education. Now I'm specialized in the knowledge of education, but that's all I have. Let's say education falls apart. Now what do I have? Specialized knowledge in something that doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Same contract. Now do I have to go back and get more degrees to get something else? I think that's where we falter here, is that we think that we need this,
Mm-hmm.
think that we need to do this before we get this. We think that the outside needs to come on the inside first. We think we need information, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Our formation, when really what we need is inspiration, something to go into our spirit, something to come from our spirit to come out of us. And it depends on what we're plugged into. Now, not everybody is a religious person, but I do believe that we are all spiritual beings at the core.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what we agree in, what we believe in, whether it's God, Buddha, Allah. There is an energy, a life force, a source that flows through each one of us, that when you cut everything else off, when you take everything else, it's the only thing that remains,
Exactly.
and it inspires us all the same. So us coming into this conversation, we didn't have a script,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure that someone was touched in some way. Where did that come from?
You're right.
Inside, right?
Yeah, exactly.
From connecting
Exactly.
our experiences, from thinking about ways that based on our experiences and based on our combined experience, now we can come up with a new idea. And we didn't need to go to college to get this.
Exactly.
Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think there's anything wrong with the education system as far as the social aspect of it, where we learn how to get along with people. We learn how to discipline ourselves and how to do the things that are going to be necessary when we get into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that there's no better way to gain the experience that you need in something that you want to do rather than doing what you are wanting to do.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the reason why like internships, which is really strange, and it also depends on like the type of college that you go to, but like internships are so important, but I feel like certain colleges don't even push that. They just say, no, just keep your degree or keep going through your track and your degree and you'll be fine. And I feel like a lot of that is also still coming from the old mindset that our parents taught us, right? Our parents said like, and I've always kind of gone through the deal of our parents said, hey, you go to school, you get good grades, you go to this cool college, you get good grades there, and you want to make sure you go to a good college, right? You get good grades there, and then you get out, and then you'll get a job. Like they make it so simple. They say make it sound so simple.
Yeah.
But in truth, it's there's so much more to it. It's not just like you go to college and you get these good grades and you do this or whatever like that. It's make sure you actually learn what you're actually going to school for and make sure that you can actually apply that.
And
um
that's where the change, the magic happens is an application.
exactly.
Wisdom is not knowledge. Knowledge is not anything but knowledge until it's applied, and then it becomes wisdom.
Exactly. And so yeah, I think our colleges should be structured more of like your school in France was. Hey, you're going to learn about this. Let's go ahead and jump into like how we're going to apply this instantly. Whether it be like a lab, right? You have a lab that's trying to teach you exactly what you're learning about at that time, or say like, well, hey, during this course, we're going to make it to where you have one class in the class, or you have one class in the classroom, right, in the college setting, and then your next class is an internship with a specific company that we've partnered with, right?
Right.
Bam, you're automatically learning exactly what you're trying to do, what your degree is for, where you want to go. Because one, that helps you instantly figure out, oh, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Right.
Two, it also makes it to where you get yourself set up for even if the school is partnering with like 5 or 6 different companies in the area, right? You get a automatically a foot in the door with that company, so that way when you do decide you want to get out, or the way when you're actually, I should say, when you graduate, right? You have a spot where you can go. You already have like that thought, because I feel like that was the other thing when I got out of school was like, what do I apply for? Like, I don't like I got all this information, but I never got the information that tells me where I need to be. Like, where do I need to go? Right.
Process.
Um, and so you're just like, I just apply to jobs and that's, one of these should work. Right. And so, that's where you get these people who get like, they have their zoo degree or zoology degree or something like that, and then they're going into like they're a teacher, or they'll, not saying teacher's bad, but they'll go into something that's completely not related to what their grade is or what their
Period.
degree is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, being in the restaurant industry, it was it was funny because so many people I waited tables with
Mm-hmm.
had degrees. I'm talking bachelor's, master's, doctorates. And we're
Mm.
still waiting tables because there's this illusion, like you're talking about, that we're just going to go on this linear path, right? And rarely is life ever linear. But
Yeah,
we're gonna go
exactly.
on this linear path and we're going to hit the points on the timeline just like a movie.
Get those check marks.
Yeah, the check boxes, the check marks, the to-do list,
Mm-hmm.
and come at the end, and I'm just gonna apply and tell them I have this paper, and now they're gonna hire me, and I'm gonna make $100,000 a year.
Exactly.
Okay, I I I was thinking as you were talking, and I had this idea come to me that I've never thought of before. But what if there was a system where the actual fields, like the field of engineering, the field of tech, there was like trade schools, but that's where school started, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we went to character school first to learn
Mm.
to learn
Mm-hmm.
how to act in situations, and we were actually put in similar situations where we would have to critically think about how we would handle something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That way,
That's
by the
true.
time we make it to the trade school, we have the character necessary, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then once the character's formed and the habits are there that are going to be needed for whatever trade we're going to go into, now we can focus on the trade. It's like getting your basics out of the way.
Exactly.
Now the system's set up and it works perfectly for some types of people, but
Exactly.
others it doesn't. So there needs to be almost like a left brain school and a right brain school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for the creatives, we're going to take you down this path where you actually do stuff, where you actually are or more than just left and right brain, because I feel like there's different types of learners in every one of those categories. There's the auditory learner, the person that has to do the hands-on. There's the visual. There's the person that has to read everything about something before they act, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Logical people. I feel like there should be schools based on maybe even just taking the what Myers-Briggs or one of those personality type tests, and then that tells you which school you go to from there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Just start your kids out that way, right?
Right,
Let me figure out what type of learner you are. And
right,
then you go to this specific school.
right. And
Because
we
that way you're automatically because if you have a school that's catering to how that child learns, then you can essentially start throwing a whole bunch of different subjects and stuff like that to them, but they'll be able to absorb it like a sponge because they actually because that school is catered to how they learn.
they're
Because
involved there. It's about them, and it's individualized rather than
exactly,
generalized.
exactly, and they don't feel like an outcast in their own school
Right. You're not
amongst their own peers.
right. You're not going to be ashamed for being the one that stands out. But part of that, so it's a catch 22 because I feel like depending on how you take what happens through education and use it in your life will determine how you use these struggles, right? That
Mm,
we have to go through in getting to the point where we realize that this didn't work for us, the kind of people that turns us into. Because I can't say that I would do this any different looking back, right?
yeah,
But I feel like there's a fine line between are we catering to or coddling, like where's the balance?
yeah, yeah. It's like, do you want to deprive your child of that experience of trying to figure out how things work?
Right,
But at the same, like, do you want to deprive them of that, or do you want to have them go down the route of where things are easier for them, um, and they don't have to feel like you grow out of it's sad because I mean, it's not sad. It's just how human nature is. It's like you grow out of adversity,
right,
and a lot of times that will make you a better person. But I'm not going to say that's all the time. It also just depends on how you're wired. But
right,
yeah, I get that. Like, do we want to go down the route of, cool, we're gonna make it so where every kid has a perfect opportunity to feel great and be able to learn the way that they actually want to learn, right? um but then you but then when they get out into the real world, right,
Find it
they
don't work out.
yeah, they exactly, they discover those adversities that they probably should have gotten when they were in school, so that way they can better get, like, put themselves into society, which is
Same as homeschool, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Schooling just robs you of that whole experience of getting bullied,
Mhm.
getting picked on, and building that intestinal fortitude that comes with being in public school,
Exactly.
even private schools.
Yeah, private school's the exact same way.
Goodness.
So it's really hard, right? It's because and it goes down to back to, like, the ideology, like, how do you wanna raise your children? It's like, because as parents, right, you never want to put your child in a spot where they really have to struggle, right? But at the same time, you understand that those struggles are things that they, in some ways, need to go through to be stronger. It's almost like we have to create, like, a controlled environment to where you're you're pushing your child off the ledge, but at the same time, you still have there's still a safety net somewhere around there,
Right.
right? You have the bungee cord with them. So you push them off the ledge, there's a bungee cord, so that way they get to go down as far as they need to learn that experience, to get that experience, but at the same time, there's always that cord to pull them back
Yeah.
just in case they go too far.
It's like the bungee cord is, you have to set the bungee cord tension where their face is going to hit the floor
Mhm.
just enough to scare them, not enough to fall flat on their face.
Exactly.
Like I felt like the ground was touching my nose, and then I got yanked back up.
Exactly. I could smell the dirt.
Yeah, I I I may be a different case, an edge case with this one, but I do, and this sounds so morbid. When you're a new parent,
Mhm.
first kid, you don't want them to go through any struggle, you don't want them to feel any pain, you want them to, don't touch my kid, don't do this to, and then you realize that they're becoming spoiled.
Mhm.
So then you got to kind of pull back. What I've learned with teenagers is you have to almost completely let go, remove the ego completely from the equation,
Mhm.
because they are becoming their own people. And if you hinder that, they'll run from you.
Huh.
They'll fight, they'll kick back, they'll push back on everything you say. They'll do the opposite. It's that
Mhm.
2-year old mentality. Don't do that. Don't do what? This, right? So
Yeah.
it's like this, it's like driving a stick. How much
Mm.
clutch and how much gas do you give it? When do you shift?
Mhm.
And when do you switch it to automatic mode and then just put it in drive and let it go? When do you switch seats, right? When are you the passenger and they're the driver with the chicken brake?
Yeah.
It's
That's so hard
right. And
because you go through a whole stage of their development to where you're doing the you're applying this one education or one, like, kind of like parenting style, and then you have to instantly change it.
it feels like instantly. What it is, what I've noticed is, since there's five and they're, kind of trailing in the years there, 16,
Mhm.
17, 18, 19, 22. Okay, 22-year-old got all the worst things because he was the guinea pig, right? Let's
Mhm.
find what works and what doesn't. Turned out well. But you find with the next one, okay, you're coming up on this, so this is how we're going to handle it this time. Okay, that's not working. Let's modify. But then you can't apply the same thing to every child either.
Mhm.
So what I found is that when I was butting heads with my children, I realized that it's because they were just like me, and I forgot what it was like to be in that place that they're
Hmm.
at, with the education system, with the hormones, with the way they view life and that mindset before the frontal lobe finishes developing at 25.
Mhm.
There's just this point in your life where you're run by emotion, and The thing that I've had to find is that another reason question everything has become a thing is that questions can change the entire course of someone's life. You can
Mm.
ask a question that because you don't know the answer to, you won't stop thinking about, which kind of brings me to my question for you. What is one question that you've thought about or haven't stopped thinking about or trying to answer to yourself?
Mhm.
That question that kind of stumped you from the time you heard it, but you know it changed your life forever. Do you have one of those questions that were asked?
That is a good question. um, I'm trying to think. I think it's probably uh, why do you not want help?
Ooh,
Um, and
wow.
it's something that I feel like has plagued my life for, you know, my whole life really. Plagued me my whole life.
Wow.
Because uh
How does that speak to you, right? Like that
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
some core deep down. Why do you not want help? Is it because you think that you can do it all yourself, or you think that you have to do it all yourself? Do you feel like
Mhm.
there's something you have to prove? Could it be the education part of it that says it's like when you are told you have a disability and that there's that shame that comes with it. Now all of a
Mhm.
sudden you don't want help because you feel like you
I'm
want,
going back to that.
yeah, I want to prove to you I'm not disabled and that I know how to do it myself.
Yep.
So I don't need your help.
Yep. Yep. It probably does kind of come from that because I remember like it was what it was middle school, I think it was when I really like it really hit me to where it's like, oh, I'm in all of this. Like I'm all in these uh resource classes or whatever like that.
Right.
I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. And so I remember putting myself in the mindset. And at the same time, it's like, your parents try their best. But again, you get to the point you understand that, they're people too. They're just literally trying to figure out how everything works. And so they're trying to help you as much as possible. And they're trying to be there and saying, like, I understand what you're going through. But at the same time, the education system and the way like society is continues to tell you that they don't understand what you're feeling, and so you have to be here alone. And so for me at that point in time, I remember I pushed myself the hardest I ever had. And I feel like in some ways I actually ended up getting burnt out slightly, like
Mhm.
burnt out just on education, um, just so that I could get back to the standard of normal that people want me to be in. And so, yeah, it was, you know, all through middle school, pushing myself so that I didn't have to be different. Because at the same time, middle school is like when you have your teenage awakening, right? You start to remember like, oh, well, I like girls, and oh, I want to fit into this specific group or whatever like that. And so you push yourself and you push yourself and you push yourself and to get into that point, especially when you already feel like you're behind, right? When
Right.
you feel like you're a mile behind all of your peers and
Right.
you want to be where they are, it's like you're having to run a huge mile and they're still going. That's the thing. It's like it's keep going. So you have to push 10 times harder than they already are just so that you can keep up with them. And then once you're there, you're like, oh, I'm so tired. And they're like, oh, well, but we've been doing this forever. And it's like, you don't get that same deal. And so I think having that consistently having to go into your mind, um, I think that was is I think you're right. That's where it kind of stems from, where I still struggled to that. I still struggle with it to this day, right? Like there are times where I don't tell my parents certain things about like what's happening in my life, or if I do, it's going to take a little while for me. or because I don't want them, because that's the other thing, right? I always thought of myself while I was going through that stuff as a burden. I always thought of like, hey, I'm the problem person because I'm not the same as X person or whatever like that. So you guys are having to put more into me than you would in others. And so it's like, I don't want you to have to go through that. And so again, I say like, oh, well, I got this, or it's fine, or things are okay. Things are going perfectly fine. I know what I'm doing. I don't need any help. And then they ask that question, and it's funny because it happens in every different stage. And um, for me, my mom actually helped me kind of remember this relatively recently, but it's like, um, and I'm religious, so it's I always my mom always said that it's like God's always helped you through those moments where that question gets asked,
Yeah.
um, to help me remember that I need help every single time. Every single time where I really get into the deepest point to where I'm like, I need help, but I don't want to ask for help. He instantly throws something to me, right? Like I always bring up the story of how I got to where I am now. Like the job that I have was purely one of those moments where it's like I got out of school, I knew what I wanted to try to do, but you throw out, especially when you get out of school, you throw out your application everywhere and no one picks it up.
Right.
And then you finally get something. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, it's not exactly what you want, but you're like, well, I can just do this for a certain amount of time. And then I'll get to where I need to be. Again, where it's you're putting things into your own hands and saying, like, I got this. And then you get slapped quickly,
Right.
and God says like, nah, I got you. I'm the one who's steering this. You need to remember that
Right.
I'm trying to help you out. And but you're still in that mindset of I got this, I know what I'm doing. And so yeah, it was, I applied to all these jobs, no one grabbed me. And I got the degree, or I got the stuff that I thought was the right stuff, was the correct, like, I was looking at stuff and I was looking at the applications, like, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. And I was like, I got this, I know what I'm doing. And I apply and nothing happens, I don't get any response back. And then I finally get something that I'm like, I don't want to do. I stayed in that for 6 months, literally. And um, a friend of mine and my manager, because I was at the time, I was still working at my part time job at the Container Store and doing a full time job
Mm.
at a tech company. And um, while I was at work, my friend said, "Hey, there's this job um that just opened up in the corporate office. I think you should apply for it." And again, my mindset says, "Hey, I don't need help. That's cool. I'm not ready for it because I need to stay on my path that I created for myself. I don't not, I'm good." And then my manager says, and this is where it really just kind of sinks in always, is my manager says, "Hey, this job just opened. I already sent them an email about you and about what you studied, and they want to do an interview. They just want you to send in your application."
Mm.
One of those moments where it's literally God just saying like, "Hey, I told you, I got you. Let me do it for you." And so, he I just jumped into the process, and he just guided me throughout the rest of it just to get to where I am. And so, um, going back to your question, it's still a struggle today. Um, but that's the question that continues to um haunt me in some ways because it's always there, because you get put into a false sense of security to where you feel like, oh, I got this, I don't need any help.
Right.
And
And
your spirit cries out for it though.
that pride and ego, we think no one else sees the issues that we're having or the problem that we have, and it's clear for the entire world to see. Everyone else can see that we're struggling but us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's once we drop those, we take off the mask and we drop the act, that we actually receive the help that we need. And one of my biggest struggles has been pride and ego. Just it's a daily reprieve to just humble myself and not make it about me or
Mm-hmm.
my approach. And almost every time, no, every time I've turned something around and made it about myself, like I can guarantee you, if I ever make this show about myself, it will come to an end. God will rip the rug from underneath me and be like, that's not how I want you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do it like that, do it yourself, but without my help. And
Exactly.
you work extra hard and you burn yourself out. And if we're not humble, we'll be humiliated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Humiliated time and time again. So what I do to check myself is I do a daily inventory. I ask myself the questions, the hard questions. I take the
Mm-hmm.
long, hard looks in the mirror and I say, where did I mess up today? Where could I have been different today? I'm sure at some point during this interview, there's some part of my character defect that came out that said, you didn't even think about this other person. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't even do this. You didn't, there's always that, but the inner critical voice looks different today, right? It's not as harsh as far as beating myself up. It's more of reflective, introspective. Okay, you did the best you could with what you have, right? I had a really long talk with my son yesterday and last week, but yesterday he went from this state of mumbling everything, speaking
Mm-hmm.
clearly and articulating and cussing me out. And I was okay with that because it's better than not saying it, holding it in,
Makes sense.
afraid. I'm like, no, I know I was a shit parent. Excuse my language. I was bad. Me and your mom were doing the best with what we had though. And I think that awareness, that my awareness, my question was, Dad, why do you always drink beer? My 3-year-old
Mm-hmm.
daughter told that she asked that to me, and I paused and I never thought, why am I putting all these drugs in my body? What am I running from? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where that cycle started. And I was out on a relapse about a year and a half ago. I'd been
Mm-hmm.
out smoking weed and drinking again for 3 years, but I was succeeding. So I thought nothing was wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the soul, the part of me that had grown, that that connection with my higher power, with God, it was not the same. And I was living with ambivalence. I was living with, I know what I should be doing, but I'm doing this. And so there's this fight going on the inside of me all the time. I did an interview when I got my job as an account manager,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a really different interview. As like, he asked me, what do I need? What does Gregory need? And
Hmm.
no one had ever asked me that. Interviews were like, what can you do for us? Why do you want this job? Why should we hire you? This one was more like, we already know how you work, we know how you operate, what can we do to serve you? And it was like, wait, what? This is how life works when you get to this level? But he asked me, how do you manage your vices? And it hit me at that point because I had been not managing my vices. It was like that refresher question. So my question is more kind of like yours. Why do you not need help?
That's so amazing.
Right? Why?
Like,
It's the same. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
It's the same concept. It's always that pride and ego. It's that we think that we don't need anyone else. And that's the essence of human connection is, or human life is connection. We do
Mm-hmm.
each other. We do. Brian Sullivan, one of my mentors in the UX field,
Mm-hmm.
that trust me, we're better together. That statement stuck with me so deep because it was, I don't even think he realizes how deep it was. But we are better together. Why compete with each other when I'm sure that we could offer so much more when we work together?
Mm-hmm.
Purpose.
Exactly.
So my last question for you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Actually, you had something else you were gonna say.
No, I was just gonna say, like, that's so powerful. Like, it's so true. Um, like it's I feel like that's the greatest lie of the world, right? It's
Self-sufficiency.
exactly self-sufficiency. You're by yourself. You are perfectly fine by yourself, and you are better by yourself. When in truth, it's not. It's not. You can even see it as like the it's funny because it's like, yeah, especially our American society says that you need to be by yourself and you need to be self-sufficient, when in fact our whole economy is self-sufficient on others.
Right.
So it's like it's a it's a contradiction, right? As an individual, you need to be self-sufficient, but you can't be self-sufficient because of how our society is already built. So it's like, how does that even make any sense? And so you have people fighting against the own ideology that's pushed to them, because
Right.
they don't understand. Like, that's the reason why we have such a big disconnect, is because we're consistently trying to fight against the ideology that makes no sense to us, but we're like, oh, this is the right way things are supposed to go.
Right. Right.
So it's
It all comes
insane.
back to the education, right?
Exactly. You need to learn this way. You need to be self-sufficient. If you have any issues, you need to figure it out, because that's what we tell our children
Hmm.
in our education system. We say, figure it out. Everybody else is going to keep moving on.
You know,
And so it pushes you in that self-sufficiency.
I think, and this is such a silly motto for business. I think it's probably going to do me harm, but this is who I am. I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's going to be good. My kids
Mm-hmm.
always ask me when I'm in the kitchen, "What are you cooking?" They started stopping themselves. Oh, you don't know what you're doing, but it's going to be good, and they trust that because when I do finish what I'm doing, it
Mm-hmm.
is good. I didn't come in with a plan. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know what it tastes like. I know what I can visualize it in my head, and I will make it happen on a plate.
Exactly.
But that's how I live my life. But maybe that's why, if we think about it, right? How much different are our parents in thinking than we are if we came from them? So
Mm.
if an educator is telling you to figure it out, as a kid, you're like, man, they're mean. They want me to figure it out. Why don't they just help me?
Yeah,
As an
exactly.
adult, looking back, if a kid asks you something now, right, and you tell them, "Go figure it out," why?
Yeah.
Why are you telling them that? Because you don't know, right?
Exactly.
And that pride is that thing that will separate us. Because if I take my pride and my ego out of the equation and I say, I don't know, let's figure it out together, that changes the whole dynamic, right?
It does. It does.
When one teaches, two learn.
Exactly. And it also goes back to that societal thing of, we make our teachers make them feel we make the teachers feel as though they need to be higher than the kids.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, we're at the same level. Yeah, there may be knowledge gaps, but there are knowledge gaps on both ends.
Right. And you'd be surprised, from the mouth of babes, man, the things that you can learn from a child.
Mm-hmm.
I actually
Mm-hmm.
have another interview I was supposed to be doing this weekend with my 2-year-old niece, Riley. She'll be 3 January 19th. I'm going to do an interview with her and just ask her questions. I couldn't get her to sit still. I finally figured I should give her an apple or something that she can eat on, because she will stay
Mm-hmm.
put while she's eating that. But you'd be surprised the wisdom that comes from children, because they still have that innocent view of the world. They're
Mm-hmm.
not tainted yet by the education system, by the trying to fit you in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my last question for you, and then I want to plug the catch up here with you and John. I want to find
Mm.
out about where my people can hear more of you,
Of course.
because I've really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we've got some clarity that we didn't have when we first got on this conversation. Even talking about this subject before we came to this, we've got more clarity.
Exactly.
What is one question that you think everyone should be asking themselves?
Mm. I'd actually probably go with the question that I get asked the most, which is just um why it's funny, it's why are you doing this alone? Why don't you need help? Like you said. It's just why? Because it changes the way you think of things. Because it's like I feel like you can ask that to anyone, right? And no matter what situation you're in, they will instantly think of the issue that they have, right? Or whatever's going on, and they'll make them think.
It breaks that hypnotic rhythm.
Exactly.
We don't even know why are you still drinking like this? Why you drink to oblivion every day? I never thought about that because I'd started doing it so young
Mm-hmm.
that before you know it, it feels like it's just something that you do because you like it. And it's really, I'm running from this. So
Exactly.
why are you doing this alone? I love that. Why are you doing this alone? It's different than why don't you need help? Or why do
Mm-hmm.
you want help? It's the same concept, but it hits different because now you're asking yourself, why am I doing this alone?
Mm-hmm.
When I know that if I just reach out and ask for help, everything is better.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the greatest gift that God gives to us in general, right?
Yeah.
Because he automatically shows us that. And like, I don't mean to get super religious, but it's just like he shows us that within the relationship between him and us.
Right.
It's instant, just like, why are you trying to do this alone?
Right.
Like,
Where are you?
exactly. And it's like he taught us that from the very beginning, so that way we could try to do that the same with everyone around us,
Yeah.
so that way we can truly, like, it goes back to like what my uncle said and told me a long time ago was, life is really simple. It's just we make it more complicated than it needs to be.
Simple, but not easy.
Exactly.
Yes. Yes.
and
It really is.
that's like the greatest lie that we get told in general, is just like life super complicated and stuff like that. And it's like, no, it's technically simple. It's just when you it's funny because my girlfriend even like pointed this out, but it's like when you put yourself in a box, everything becomes more complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Everything's in a box.
yeah. um so yeah, it's um I I'll go ahead and plug myself, and then I'll ask you a question that I usually ask. So you can find the Catchup podcast anywhere where you can find any podcast. So that's Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, just anywhere that you can think of for a podcast. We're pretty much there. We're even on Pandora. We also have a Facebook page called the Catchup Podcast with John and Denison. You can also, if I'm not mistaken, you can also look it up by the Catchup Cast on Facebook. We are also on YouTube as well, our YouTube page is the Catchup Podcast with John and Denison. And we also have a Gmail. So, if you want to reach out to us, communicate to us, we always love hearing from our listeners. And we always love getting feedback from our listeners and stuff like that. And so, uh, you can reach out to us. We always want to get ideas from you guys as well. We always think of it'd be great to have like a whole episode just based on what our listeners had I asked for or ideas had on. And so yeah, we the email is the ketchupcast@gmail.com.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Man, I appreciate that. I'm glad that we ran into each other the way we did.
Of
Text me,
course.
who would have known? And now I'm getting to catch up on everything that I missed.
Exactly. Exactly.
Catch up. Ah,
uh,
all right.
So I do want to ask you one question in closing, and I like to do this for all my interviews. So it is, if you say you listen, you're your future self now. It's 5 years from now, and you're listening back to this episode. What would you like to tell yourself?
I
I know
w-
it's a hard question.
no, I love this question. Keep it simple, stupid. Get back to because all my life there's always been something else I needed to learn or something else I needed to do, or this person up here is doing this and I just need to find out what they're doing to be keep it simple. If you ever notice, the higher you go up in rank, in money, in status, the happier those people are. It's not because they're there that they're happy, it's because they're happy that they're there. It's because
Mm,
they're whole, it's because that they stick to the basics, the spiritual principles that are at the core of everything we do. There's 31 of them that I keep in my spiritual principle jar. I don't know if you've seen this. This is my
uh-oh.
spiritual principle jar. This is the neat one where other people can read what I wrote. So when I don't know what to do, and this will probably be great in 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what I need to hear in 5 years when I look at that. Awareness and open-mindedness.
There you go.
We've got awareness from this. We've opened our minds to a new possibility, but I think that in keeping it simple, getting back to the basics, make your bed in the morning, pray to whatever you believe in. And the reason I like to keep it inclusive is because in recovery, if it wasn't inclusive, I wouldn't have found my higher power.
Makes sense.
I was scarred by religion because of the way it came into my family. My mom became a Jehovah's Witness after trying to push me to be a Jehovah's Witness, and it split the whole family because we used to have the biggest holiday parties. And so it was a scar that had I come into a 12-step program and they talked about that was the way, I would have run away and I probably would have never found sobriety. So I like to be inclusive in that way.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
But the basics of just doing the next right thing that's in front of you and changing the energy of what you want to see in the world. Because if I'm focusing where I'm focusing, energy goes. What I focus on grows. If I'm focusing on what's wrong and what's not happening and what I don't like, that's what I'll be focusing on. But if I'm focusing on the future self, who I want to be, who I am when I'm listening to this 5 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
I start to embody that. It's almost that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Thing about self-fulfilling prophecy is it works both ways.
Ah.
It's the same amount of energy. I'll give you an example. When you're about to record a podcast, you have that feeling inside and it's welling up and it feels overwhelming. When you're about to hop on stage and speak in front of people, when you know it's your turn in a group of people and they're like, we're going to introduce ourselves and tell everyone one thing about us. It feels like anxiety. It feels like nervousness. Okay, that's valid if that's what you put on it, if that's the label you choose.
Mm-hmm.
Also valid if you say I'm exhilarated or I'm excited. It's the same energy. It's changing the wording and changing the mindset that makes the difference. And so when I said in the beginning, I'm excited because I'm nervous, but I want to change that energy so that I use it and not let it use me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the wisdom I have for you, Gregory, in the future 5 years, 5 years from now. That is the wisdom I have for you.
That's good wisdom, man.
You know what? I like that. I like that question. What would you tell yourself in 5 years?
That is a good question. um, I think it would probably be Um, always remember that you have people in your life that are willing and want to help you. No matter where you are, there's always someone there for you. Um, just open up to them. Um,
That's
because I can easily see myself in 5 years being in the same situation I was, you know, few years ago. Still in my own head, and believing that I need to um, do everything by myself, or there's no one here to help me, or there's no one here who wants to help me or wants to be here for me or whatever. Um,
that's good.
so yeah.
I could see that when we first met too.
Mm-hmm.
And you can almost always see someone's biggest struggle just listening to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
wonder
true.
what people think mine is. I wonder what people see in me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But uh this has been a great, great interview.
Oh yeah, man. It's been amazing
Uh
interview.
I appreciate the time and being able to be on the catch up. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
you coming on to question everything.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate the experience. Oh, I almost forgot.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I wanted to have you plug where people can find you again.
All right. You can find me on your local street corner. Just kidding. No, question everything on YouTube. There's right now season one. I'm working on episode 7. You know, even though there's like 3 episodes between 6 and 7 because I'm doing question everything and everyone. But Gwiz Insane on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram is Gwiz Inquisitive. That's where you'll see my posts about. I don't know. I'm getting the Instagram presence up right now. I have a group on Facebook though.
Okay.
Gregory Rutledge, my full name. You'll find me. My page is where I do all my coaching. So there's a private group from confused to confident where I nurture my people. Um, I give away the value that I can for free. And then there's the program, the Clearly Confident Path, that I'm working on right now with a few clients. And I'm getting results. So we're working on those testimonials so that we can get more people changed. Uh, but Facebook and YouTube for now.
Okay.
Working
Okay.
uh yeah, it's all coming together, but like you said, you can get stuck in your head. You can overthink. Analysis paralysis. I'll be stuck in
Exactly.
my head because if it can be on my mind all the time, but until I take action, it won't happen. Action cures anxiety.
Exactly.
If I just move, anything can happen.
That's a great quote right there.
Thank you. Thank you. I came up with it on accident in coaching school, and I was like, that's really good. I'm gonna write that down.
It's really good, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm gonna let you have the rest of your Saturday back, man.
Mm-hmm. Same.
This has been very
It-
insightful.
It's been amazing.
I hope that,
Um,
that our listeners feel the same.
I think so. I think so. So yeah, this has been, like I said, an amazing interview and an amazing experience and an amazing time. To be honest, I feel like this was like eye-opening for myself. um, just because it's stuff that I don't think about. It's sometimes you need that just talking to someone, and it could be apparently it can be about anything really, and you learn so much more about yourself.
Yeah,
uh just because of, again, that goes back to, we are meant to socialize with each other
yeah,
in one way or another. Some people can socialize with more people than others, but you are meant to socialize. You are not meant to be a a selfish being or a by yourself being. So, um, so yeah, I think this has been really fun.